I was thrown out of my own house by my daughter-in-law. My son nodded. It's time you take care of yourself. I called the police, but the one who answered was her father. With no way out, I knelt on the sidewalk. That's when a mysterious man walked up to me and said 3 words. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Faye, and at 62 years old, I never imagined I'd find myself kneeling on a sidewalk, begging to stay in my own home. The morning started like any other Thursday. I was making coffee in the kitchen I'd called mine for 37 years, when I heard Jovie's voice echo through the hallway. My daughter-in-law had that particular tone she used when she was about to deliver one of her ultimatums. "Michael, we've talked about this," she said to my son. "She has to go. Today." I froze, the coffee mug trembling in my hands. They were talking about me, again. "But Mom's lived here since before we were married," Michael replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "This was her house first," was being the operative word, Jovie snapped. "We've been paying the mortgage for 3 years now. We've been patient, but I'm done sharing my space with someone who clearly resents me." My heart sank. It was true that Michael had taken over the mortgage payments when my late husband's medical bills drained our savings. But this house held 40 years of memories. Every room told a story of the life I'd built with Robert, of raising Michael, of family dinners and birthday parties. I walked into the living room, trying to keep my voice steady. "Jovie, if this is about the dishes from last night, I was planning to—" "This isn't about dishes," she cut me off, her green eyes cold as winter ice. "This is about boundaries. This is about respect. And frankly, Faye, you've overstayed your welcome." Michael stood behind his wife, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. At 35, my son looked so much like his father, but Robert never would have stood silent while someone spoke to me that way. "Michael," I said softly, "surely we can work something out. This is my home, too." He couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, maybe it's time you considered other options. Senior living, maybe. You'd have people your own age to talk to." The words hit me like a physical blow. Senior living, as if I were some burden to be warehoused away from real life. "I'm 62, not 92, I said, my voice cracking. "I don't need to be put away somewhere." Jovie stepped forward, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the counter. "You need to understand something, Faye. Michael and I are trying to build our future here. We want to start a family, renovate this place, make it ours. Your presence is complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the word. "The guest room could be a nursery," Michael added quietly. "And we've been talking about turning your sewing room into a home office." My sewing room. The space where I'd made Michael's Halloween costumes, hemmed his school clothes, created quilts for every major milestone in his life. They wanted to erase me from this house as if I'd never existed. "Where am I supposed to go?" I whispered. Jovie shrugged. "That's not really our problem to solve anymore. You're a grown woman. Figure it out." The casual cruelty of her words left me speechless. This was the woman my son had chosen over his own mother. This was the future of my family. "I need a few days to—" "You need to leave today," Jovie interrupted. "I've already called a locksmith. The locks will be changed by 5 o'clock. I turned to Michael, searching his face for any sign of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. "Michael, please." He finally looked at me, and what I saw there broke my heart completely. Resignation. He'd already made his choice. "It's time, Mom," he said softly. "It's time for you to figure out your own life." 3 hours later, I stood on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box containing 40 years of photographs. The locksmith was already at work, the sound of the drill echoing in my ears like a funeral dirge. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "Emergency services. What's your emergency?" "I've been illegally evicted from my home," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need someone to—" "Ma'am, you'll need to call the non-emergency line for tenant disputes," the operator interrupted. "But they changed the locks. They won't let me get my things." The line went quiet for a moment. "What's the address?" I gave her my address, and my heart sank when I heard her intake of breath. "Ma'am, I'm going to transfer you to Sergeant Davis. He handles that district." The line clicked, and a gruff male voice came on. "This is Sergeant Davis. I understand you're having some issues with your living situation." "Yes. I've been locked out of my own home by your family," he interrupted. "Yeah, I know the situation. Look, lady, family disputes aren't really a police matter. Maybe you should have thought about this before you let things get so bad with your son." My blood turned to ice. "How do you know about my son?" He chuckled, and the sound made my skin crawl. "Let's just say I'm well informed about the situation. My advice? Find somewhere else to stay. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The line went dead, and I stared at my phone in disbelief. How did a police sergeant know about my family situation? How was he well informed? That's when it hit me. Davis. Jovie's maiden name was Davis. The police sergeant was Jovie's father. I sank to my knees right there on the sidewalk, the weight of my situation crashing down on me. I had nowhere to go, no one to call, and even the police were against me. Tears streamed down my face as I realized how completely alone I was. "Excuse me," a deep voice said softly. "Are you all right?" I looked up through my tears to see a man in his 60s standing a few feet away. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and kind brown eyes that seemed familiar somehow. He wore an expensive-looking coat and carried himself with quiet confidence. "I'm fine," I lied, wiping my face with the back of my hand. He looked at my suitcases, then at the house where I could see Jovie watching from the window with satisfaction in her eyes. "No," he said gently, "you're not fine. And you shouldn't have to kneel on a sidewalk like this." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight I couldn't quite understand. "You deserve better." Something about his voice sent a chill down my spine. There was something achingly familiar about it, like a half-remembered song from decades past. The man extended his hand to help me up, and the moment our skin touched, 40 years melted away in an instant. "Marcus?" The name escaped my lips as barely a whisper. His warm brown eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled, the same smile that had once made my teenage heart race. "Hello, Faye." I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my chest. Marcus Williams, my first love, the boy my parents had forbidden me to see because his family was beneath us. The man I'd thought about every day for the first 5 years of my marriage, until guilt finally forced those memories into a locked corner of my heart. "I don't understand," I stammered. "What are you doing here? How did you—" "I live here now," he said gently. "Bought the house 3 streets over about 6 months ago." 6 months? He'd been living 3 streets away from me for 6 months and I had no idea. "I've been keeping an eye on you," he continued. And before I could feel alarmed, he added quickly, not in a creepy way, I wanted to make sure you were okay. When I heard about Robert's passing 2 years ago, I thought about reaching out, but I wasn't sure if it would be appropriate. My legs felt weak. "You knew about Robert?" "I know about a lot of things, Faye." His voice carried a sadness that matched my own. "I know about the medical bills that wiped out your savings. I know your son took over the mortgage. And I know that woman in there has been making your life hell for months." I stared at him, this ghost from my past who somehow knew the intimate details of my present nightmare. "How could you possibly know all that?" Marcus glanced toward the house where Jovie was still watching from the window. "Small town. People talk, and when you care about someone." He trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. "Care about someone?" I repeated. "Marcus, we haven't spoken in 43 years. "No," he said softly. "We haven't. But that doesn't mean I stopped caring." The weight of his words settled between us like a bridge across decades of silence. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the impossibility of this moment. "Come on," he said, reaching for one of my suitcases. "Let me get you somewhere warm. We can talk properly." I wanted to protest, to maintain some dignity, but the truth was, I had nowhere else to go. I picked up my box of photographs while Marcus grabbed my other suitcase. And together we walked away from the house that had been my world for 4 decades. Marcus's house was everything mine wasn't anymore. Peaceful, welcoming, filled with the kind of quiet luxury that spoke of success rather than struggle. The living room was decorated in warm earth tones, with built-in bookshelves and a fireplace that actually looked used. "Coffee?" he asked, and I nodded gratefully. While he was in the kitchen, I studied the room more carefully. The furniture was expensive but comfortable. Not the kind of showpiece items Jovie was always coveting. Photos lined the mantelpiece, and I found myself drawn to them. Most were landscapes or what looked like business events. But there, in a simple silver frame, was a picture that made my breath catch. It was me, taken at our high school graduation. I was 18, wearing a white dress my mother had sewn, smiling at something off camera. I remembered that day clearly. It was one of the last times I'd seen Marcus before my parents forced us to break up. I've carried that picture with me everywhere I've lived, Marcus said quietly from behind me. I turned to find him holding 2 steaming mugs, his expression vulnerable in a way that reminded me of the boy he'd once been. Marcus, what happened to you? After your parents made it clear I wasn't good enough for their daughter? He handed me the coffee, and I caught the slight bitterness in his voice. I joined the Army, did 2 tours overseas, used the GI Bill to get an engineering degree when I came back. He settled into the chair across from me, and I noticed he moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to be cautious with the world. After college, I started a small construction company. Nothing fancy at first, just me and a truck, doing odd jobs around town. But I had something to prove. He met my eyes. I needed to become the kind of man who could have been worthy of you. Marcus. I started, but he held up a hand. Let me finish. The company grew. I got lucky with some contracts, made smart investments. By the time I was 35, I owned one of the largest construction firms in the state. By 40, I'd expanded into real estate development. I never married Faye. Never even came close. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to face. Why? I whispered. Because every woman I met, I compared to you, and none of them ever measured up to the memory of the girl who believed I could be anything I wanted to be. Tears stung my eyes. Marcus, I was 18. I was a child. My parents. Your parents were protecting their investment, he said, not unkindly. I understand that now. They'd already picked out Robert for you. Doctor's son, good family, bright future. They couldn't risk their daughter running off with some nobody from the wrong side of town. It wasn't like that, I protested, but even as I said it, I knew he was right. My parents had been thrilled when Robert showed interest in me. They'd pushed the relationship from the beginning, constantly pointing out what a good match we were, how perfect our life would be. Robert was a good man, I said quietly. He loved me. We had a good marriage. I'm sure you did, Marcus replied, and I could hear the effort it took him to say those words. I'm glad you were happy, Faye. That's all I ever wanted for you. But had I been happy? Looking back through 40 years of marriage, I realized I'd been content, satisfied. Robert had been steady, reliable, a good provider and father. But had there been passion? Had there been the kind of love that made you forget to breathe? I need to know something, Marcus said, leaning forward. That woman in there, Jovie. What's her full name? Jovie Davis, I answered automatically. Why? Marcus's expression darkened. Davis, I thought so. Her father is Sergeant Davis, isn't he? The one who brushed you off when you called for help. My coffee mug slipped in my hands. How did you know that? Because I know the Davis family, and I know how they operate. Jovie's father has been on the take for years, small stuff mostly, looking the other way on building code violations, letting certain people slide on traffic tickets. Nothing major enough to get him fired, but enough to make him useful to the right people. What are you saying? Marcus stood up and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. I'm saying this whole thing. Your eviction, the locksmith, the convenient police response, it was planned. Jovie didn't just decide this morning to kick you out. She's been working on this for months. The room seemed to tilt around me. But why? What did I ever do to her? You existed, he said simply, turning back to me. You were a reminder that the house wasn't really hers, that Michael had a life and loyalties that predated her. Some people can't stand sharing, Faye. They need to own everything completely. I thought about all the small battles over the past year, Jovie rearranging my kitchen, updating family photos to feature more of her relatives, constantly making comments about how much space I took up. I'd assumed it was normal daughter-in-law tension, but Marcus was suggesting something much more calculated. "There's something else," Marcus said, his voice dropping lower. "I did some checking after I saw how she was treating you. Jovie Davis has been married before." "What?" Michael had told me Jovie was 28 and had never been married when they met. It was one of the things he'd found appealing about her, that he was her first serious relationship, twice actually, both times to older men with property. Both marriages ended with the husbands mysteriously signing over significant assets before the divorces were finalized. My blood ran cold. "You're saying she's done this before?" Marcus nodded grimly. "And both ex-husbands had elderly parents who mysteriously became too difficult to live with during the marriages." I set down my coffee cup with shaking hands. "Michael doesn't know any of this, does he?" "Your son sees what he wants to see. She's young, pretty, makes him feel important." She probably told him some sob story about her past, made him want to protect her. Everything clicked into place. Jovie's insistence on taking over the mortgage payments, her constant comments about investing in our future, her subtle campaign to paint me as difficult and ungrateful. She'd been systematically isolating me from my own son while positioning herself as the reasonable, long-suffering wife dealing with an impossible mother-in-law. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. Marcus returned to his chair and leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "What would you say if I told you I've been planning for this day for 6 months? Ever since I moved back to town and saw what was happening to you?" "Planning what?" A slow smile spread across his face, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. "Jovie Davis has no idea who she's messing with." Marcus poured himself another cup of coffee, his movements deliberate and calm. "Tell me something, Faye. Do you remember the last conversation we had? The real one, before your parents made you write that letter?" The memory hit me like a physical blow. We'd been sitting by Miller's Creek behind the old cotton mill. I was 17, he was 19, and we'd been planning our future together with the naive certainty of young love. "You said you were going to build me a house," I whispered, "with a wraparound porch and a garden where I could grow roses. And you said you'd wait for me while I figured out how to make enough money to support a wife." His voice carried the weight of 43 years of regret. "You said your parents would come around once they saw how hard I was willing to work for you." I closed my eyes, remembering the girl I'd been, so sure that love could conquer everything, that my parents' objections were just temporary obstacles. I was so naive. We both were. But the difference is, I never stopped believing in that dream. Marcus walked over to a mahogany desk in the corner and pulled out a thick folder. When he returned, he spread papers across the coffee table between us. Property deeds, bank statements, blueprints. 6 months ago, when I decided to move back to town, I started buying property. Not just any property, strategic pieces. He pointed to a map with several lots circled in red, your neighborhood, specifically. My breath caught as I recognized the street names. "Marcus, what did you do?" "I bought 12 houses in a 4-block radius around your home, including the one I'm living in now." He met my eyes. "And 3 weeks ago, I bought something else." He pulled out another document, and I felt the world tilt beneath me. It was a mortgage transfer agreement. For my house. The house Michael and Jovie thought they owned. "That's impossible," I stammered. "Michael's been making the payments. The bank would never. The bank was happy to sell a distressed mortgage to a cash buyer at a discount. Your son's been struggling to keep up with the payments, Faye. He's missed 3 in the last 6 months." I felt sick. He never told me. "Because Jovie convinced him not to worry you with financial problems. She also convinced him that once you were out of the picture, they could refinance at a better rate and get their payments down to something manageable. So she knew they were in trouble, and she still insisted on kicking me out?" Marcus nodded grimly, because she assumed they'd have time to figure it out. "What she doesn't know is that as of yesterday afternoon, I own the mortgage on your house, which means I can call it due in full at any time." The implications hit me like a thunderbolt. "You could evict them." "I could, but that's not what I'm going to do." He leaned back, his expression turning thoughtful. "At least, not yet." I stared at him, this man who'd loved me for 4 decades from a distance, who'd become wealthy and powerful while never forgetting the girl who'd broken his heart. "Why are you doing this?" "Because 43 years ago, your father told me I'd never be good enough for his daughter. He said I was trash from the wrong side of town, that I'd never amount to anything, and that if I truly loved you, I'd let you go so you could have the life you deserved. Marcus stood up and walked to the window again, his back to me. I believed him, Faye. I thought he was right. So I let you go, and I spent the next 4 decades proving him wrong. But it was never about him, really. It was about becoming the man you deserved. Marcus. I never married because I never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, I'd get a chance to give you that life I promised. The house with the wraparound porch, the rose garden, the security your parents said I could never provide. Tears ran down my cheeks as I absorbed the weight of his confession. You built an empire for a memory. I built an empire for you. He turned back to me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. And now that spoiled little girl thinks she can just erase you from your own life? Take away everything you've worked for? Not while I'm breathing. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and smiled. Not the warm smile he'd been giving me, but something harder, more predatory. Speak of the devil, he said, showing me the screen. That's Michael. Seems they've discovered their mortgage has been transferred. My heart raced. What are you going to tell him? Nothing yet. Let them stew for a while. He set the phone down. But I think it's time I told you about the other properties I've acquired. Marcus pulled out another set of blueprints, these ones clearly architectural plans for a house. A large house with elegant lines and what looked like, my breath caught, is that a wraparound porch? And space for the biggest rose garden in 3 counties. His voice was soft now, vulnerable. I had it designed 2 years ago after I heard about Robert's passing. I bought the land, 20 acres on the lake, about 10 minutes from town. I told myself I was planning for retirement, but you were building the house you promised me when we were kids. The house I should have built for you 43 years ago if I'd been brave enough to fight for you instead of walking away. I stood up abruptly, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was telling me. This wasn't just about helping me with my current crisis. This was about a love that had endured decades of separation, a dream that had never died. I need some air, I said shakily. Marcus nodded and opened the French doors that led to his back patio. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across a beautifully landscaped yard. I could see why he'd chosen this house. It had a clear view of my neighborhood, including my own backyard. You really have been watching over me, I said softly. Not in any creepy way, he assured me quickly. Just making sure you were safe. When I saw how that woman was treating you, it took everything I had not to march over there and set her straight. Why didn't you? Because I had no right. You were married to another man, living the life your parents wanted for you. I figured my job was just to make sure you were protected from a distance. I turned to study his profile as he gazed toward my old house. What happens now? Now? Now we turn the tables. His phone buzzed again, and this time he answered it. Hello, Michael. Even from where I stood, I could hear my son's agitated voice through the speaker. Mr. Williams? This is Michael Holloway. I understand you've purchased my mortgage. I have indeed. How can I help you? Well, sir, I'm hoping we can work something out. Maybe discuss payment terms or... I think we should meet in person to discuss this, Marcus interrupted smoothly. Why don't you and your wife come by tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock? There was a pause. My wife? Is that necessary? Oh, absolutely. Mrs. Holloway, Jovie, isn't it? Will definitely want to be part of this conversation. Marcus's voice carried an undertone that made me shiver. I have a feeling she'll find it very educational. After he hung up, I stared at him. You're going to tell them who you are? Eventually. But first, I want to watch Jovie squirm a little. I want her to understand that she's not the only one who knows how to play games. What if they can't pay? What if you have to foreclose? Marcus turned to me, his expression serious. Faye, I need you to understand something. That house was never really theirs. It was yours and Robert's. You raised your son there. You made it a home. The fact that they've been making payments for 3 years doesn't erase 4 decades of your life. But Michael is my son. I don't want him to be homeless. Michael made his choice when he chose his wife over his mother. But people can change their minds when they finally see the truth about who they're dealing with. His phone buzzed with a text message, and Marcus showed me the screen. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "We know you're helping that old woman. Mind your own business or you'll regret it." Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. Jovie's getting desperate. And when people get desperate, they make mistakes. "Marcus, what if she's dangerous? What if—" "Then she'll discover that messing with you means messing with me. And I'm not the 19-year-old kid her kind of people used to be able to push around." He pocketed his phone and took my hands in his. "Faye, I want you to trust me. Can you do that?" Looking into his eyes, I saw the boy who'd once promised to build me a house, and the man who'd spent 43 years keeping that promise. "Yes," I whispered. "I trust you." "Good. Because tomorrow morning, when they show up here thinking they're going to negotiate with some random businessman who bought their mortgage, they're going to get the shock of their lives." As the sun set behind us, casting the world in shades of gold and amber, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just surviving. I was about to fight back, and I wasn't fighting alone. I spent the night in Marcus's guest room, though sleep came in restless fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jovie's satisfied smirk as I knelt on that sidewalk, or Michael's face when he told me it was time to figure out my own life. But mixed with the pain was something else, a growing sense of anticipation that I hadn't felt in decades. At 8 in the morning, Marcus knocked gently on my door. "How did you sleep?" "Like someone whose whole world just turned upside down," I said honestly. "But also like someone who might actually have hope for the first time in months." He smiled and handed me a cup of coffee. "Good. Because we have about an hour before showtime, and I want to prepare you for what's going to happen." We sat in his kitchen as he laid out his strategy. It was brilliant in its simplicity. Let them think they were dealing with a typical businessman. Let Jovie's arrogance and entitlement expose her true nature, and then reveal the connection that would shake their world. "What if Michael doesn't believe you?" I asked. "What if she's poisoned him so thoroughly against me that he won't listen?" "Then we'll know where his loyalties truly lie. But Faye, I have a feeling your son is about to see his wife's real face for the first time." At exactly 10 o'clock, Michael's car pulled into Marcus's driveway. I watched from the upstairs window as my son and daughter-in-law approached the front door. Michael looked nervous, adjusting his tie repeatedly. Jovie, on the other hand, walked with the confident stride of someone who expected to charm her way out of any situation. She dressed for the occasion, a form-fitting red dress that was more appropriate for a dinner date than a business meeting, paired with heels that clicked authoritatively on the walkway. Even from a distance, I could see her calculating expression as she studied Marcus's house, probably estimating its value and forming her strategy accordingly. Marcus had positioned himself in his home office, looking every inch the successful businessman in a tailored navy suit. He'd asked me to wait in the adjoining sitting room, where I could hear everything through the open doorway but remain unseen. The doorbell rang, and I heard Marcus's footsteps as he went to answer it. "Mr. and Mrs. Holloway," his voice carried clearly through the house. "Please come in." "Mr. Williams," Michael's voice was tense. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us on such short notice." "Not at all. Please have a seat in my office. Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be great," Michael replied. "Just water for me," Jovie said, and I could practically hear the calculated sweetness in her voice. "I have to say, Mr. Williams, you have a beautiful home. The architectural details are stunning." "Thank you. I had it renovated when I moved to town 6 months ago. Please make yourselves comfortable." I heard chairs being arranged, and then Marcus returned with refreshments. When he spoke again, his tone was businesslike but cordial. "So, let's discuss your mortgage situation. As you know, I purchased your loan from the bank 3 weeks ago." "Yes," Michael said carefully. We were surprised by that. We'd been working with the bank to restructure the payment schedule, and suddenly we got a notice that the loan had been sold. "Banks make business decisions based on risk assessment," Marcus replied smoothly. "Your payment history over the past 6 months indicated a higher risk than they were comfortable with." I heard Jovie shift in her chair. "Mr. Williams, I'm sure we can work out some arrangement that benefits everyone. My husband and I are committed to that house. It's our home, our future." I understand it was previously your mother-in-law's home, Marcus said, his voice giving nothing away. What happened to her? There was a pause, and I could imagine the look that passed between them. Family situations can be complicated, Jovie said finally. Sometimes it's better for everyone when elderly relatives have their own space. More independence, you know? Less stress for everyone involved. Interesting perspective, Marcus replied. And where is Mrs. Holloway living now? Another pause, longer this time. She's figuring things out, Michael said uncomfortably. She has options, does she? Marcus's voice had taken on a subtle edge that made my pulse quicken, because from what I understand, she was given less than a day's notice to vacate the premises. That seems rather sudden for someone who'd been living there for, 4 decades? Mr. Williams, Jovie interjected, her voice sharpening. I'm not sure why my mother-in-law's living situation is relevant to our mortgage discussion. This is about business, not family drama. You're absolutely right, Marcus agreed. This is about business. So let's talk numbers. Your current mortgage balance is $247,000. Your monthly payment, which you've missed 3 times in the past 6 months, is $1,862. We can get caught up, Michael said quickly. I've been dealing with some temporary setbacks at work, but your wife's father's legal troubles haven't helped, I imagine, Marcus interrupted casually. The silence that followed was deafening. I held my breath, wondering how Marcus knew about Sergeant Davis's problems. I'm sorry, Jovie's voice was ice cold now. Sergeant Davis. Internal Affairs has been investigating him for the past 3 months, haven't they? Something about selective enforcement, looking the other way on certain violations in exchange for consideration. I don't know what you're talking about, Jovie said, but I could hear the tremor beneath her anger. Of course you don't, Marcus replied smoothly, just like you don't know about your previous 2 marriages, or the property settlements that seemed surprisingly generous to someone with no apparent source of income. Who the hell are you? Jovie snapped, her careful facade finally cracking. Jovie, Michael's voice was shocked. What's he talking about? What previous marriages? It's nothing, baby, Jovie said quickly. Just some misunderstanding. Mr. Williams, I think you have me confused with someone else. Jovie Marie Davis. Previously Jovie Martin and Jovie Richardson, born in Millbrook County, moved to town 3 years ago right after your second divorce was finalized. Both previous husbands coincidentally had elderly parents who became difficult to live with during your marriages. Michael, we need to leave, Jovie said, her voice rising. This man is obviously some kind of stalker or… Sit down, Michael said quietly, and something in his tone made the room go silent. I want to hear what Mr. Williams has to say. Marcus's voice was calm and measured as he continued. Your current husband doesn't know that you've been married twice before, does he, Mrs. Holloway? Or that both marriages followed the same pattern: marry a man with property, isolate him from his family, gain control of assets, then move on. That's not true, Jovie protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Your first husband, James Martin, signed over his family's farm to you 6 months before you filed for divorce. His elderly mother, who'd lived on that farm for 60 years, was moved to a nursing home against her will. She died 3 months later. I heard Michael's sharp intake of breath. Your second husband, David Richardson, transferred ownership of his late father's construction business to you as a wedding gift. His widowed mother was convinced to move to Arizona to be closer to her sister. The business was sold 2 weeks after your divorce was finalized. Michael, don't listen to this, Jovie pleaded. He's making it all up to… To what? Marcus interrupted. What possible motivation would I have to lie about something so easily verified? Public records, Mrs. Holloway. Divorce decrees, property transfers, business licenses, all a matter of public record. Why are you telling us this? Michael asked, his voice hollow. Because, Marcus said, and I could hear the change in his tone. Your mother didn't deserve to be thrown out of her own home by someone running the same con she's pulled twice before. My mother? Michael repeated. What does my mother have to do with any of this? Everything, Marcus said simply. Because 43 years ago, I was in love with her. And yesterday, I watched her kneel on a sidewalk, crying, after being evicted from the home she'd lived in for 4 decades. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if they'd all left the room. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" "My name is Marcus Williams. Your mother knew me as Marcus Williams when we were teenagers, before her parents decided I wasn't good enough for their daughter." "That's impossible," Michael breathed. "Mom never mentioned. She never said." "Your mother wrote me a letter when she was 18, explaining that she was going to marry your father and that we couldn't see each other anymore. I joined the army the next day. I thought I'd lost her forever." I heard footsteps, then Marcus's voice closer to the doorway. "Faye, would you come in here, please?" My hands were shaking as I walked into the office. Michael's face went white when he saw me, while Jovie looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Mom?" Michael stood up slowly. "What are you doing here?" "She's here," Marcus said, moving to stand beside me, "because when I saw her kneeling on that sidewalk yesterday, begging not to be thrown out of her own home, I realized I'd been given a second chance to do what I should have done 43 years ago." "Which is what?" Jovie demanded, her voice shrill. Marcus looked directly at her, his expression hard as granite. "Protect the woman I love from people who want to hurt her." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Michael stared at his mother, then at Marcus, then at his wife, who looked like she was calculating her next move. "This is insane," Jovie said finally. "Michael, we're leaving. Now." "No," Michael said quietly. "No, I think I need to hear the rest of this." Jovie's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and from the desperate look in her eyes, I could see she was about to do something drastic. Jovie's face had gone from calculating to desperate, and I recognized the look in her eyes. It was the same expression I'd seen countless times over the past months when she felt cornered, cold, predatory, and dangerous. "Michael," she said, her voice taking on that syrupy tone she used when she wanted something. "This man is obviously obsessed with your mother. This whole mortgage thing is probably just a way to get close to her. We should call the police." "Your father?" Marcus asked mildly. "The same Sergeant Davis who told your mother-in-law that family disputes weren't a police matter? The one currently under investigation for corruption?" Michael turned to stare at his wife. "Your father is a police sergeant? You told me he was retired military." Jovie stammered, then recovered quickly. "I never said that. You must have misunderstood." "No," Michael said slowly. "I remember specifically. You said your father was career Army, that he did 3 tours overseas. You even showed me his medals." Marcus smiled grimly. "Purple Heart, Bronze Star, Combat Infantry Badge. Impressive collection. Too bad they belonged to a staff sergeant named Walter Davis who died in Afghanistan in 2003. Your father bought them at a pawn shop." The color drained from Jovie's face. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I make it my business to know about people who hurt the woman I love. And when I started digging into your family, Mrs. Holloway, I found a very interesting pattern." Marcus walked to his desk and pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the others. "Sergeant Davis has been supplementing his income for years. Small bribes, looking the other way on building code violations, fixing traffic tickets for the right price. But 3 months ago, he made a mistake. He took money to ignore a domestic violence call." "That's not true," Jovie whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. "The woman ended up in the hospital with 3 broken ribs and a fractured skull. When Internal Affairs started investigating why there was no police response despite multiple neighbor complaints, they discovered your father's little side business." Michael was staring at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Jovie, what is he talking about?" "He's lying," she said desperately. "Michael, baby, you know me. You know I would never—" "Do I?" Michael interrupted. "Because right now, I'm starting to realize I don't know anything about you at all." Jovie's mask finally slipped completely. "Fine," she snapped. "You want the truth? Your precious mother was a burden, Michael. She was holding us back, keeping us from having the life we deserve. That house is worth $350,000. We could have sold it, bought something smaller, invested the difference. But no, we had to keep supporting her because you were too weak to tell her to leave. The venom in her voice made me flinch. But Michael looked like he'd been physically struck. Too weak? He repeated. Yes, weak. Just like you're weak when it comes to asking for that promotion at work. Weak when it comes to standing up to your boss. Weak when it comes to everything that matters. Jovie was spiraling now. Years of hidden resentment pouring out. I've been managing your life for 3 years. Making the hard decisions you're too spineless to make yourself. Managing my life? Michael's voice was dangerously quiet. Someone had to. Left to your own devices, you'd still be living in that cramped apartment, working the same dead-end job, never taking any risks. I pushed you to buy the house. I made you take over the mortgage payments. I convinced you to apply for the supervisor position. You convinced me to abandon my mother, Michael said, and I could hear the realization hitting him like a freight train. I convinced you to prioritize your marriage over an old woman who was never going to live forever anyway, Jovie shot back. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my son's face cycle through emotions, shock, hurt, disgust, and finally, a cold anger I'd never seen from him before. Get out, he said quietly. What? Get out of here. Now. I don't want to look at you anymore. Jovie's eyes widened. Michael, you don't mean that. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in 3 years, he said, standing up. You used me. You manipulated me into betraying my own mother, and for what? Money? A house? For us, Jovie pleaded, reaching for his arm. Everything I did was for us, for our future. Michael jerked away from her touch. There is no us. Not anymore. Jovie's desperation turned to rage. You think you can just throw me away? After everything I've done for you? I made you into someone worth respecting, and this is how you repay me? By respecting my mother? By refusing to be part of your sick game? Yes, this is exactly how I repay you. Jovie turned to Marcus, her eyes blazing. This is your fault. You've poisoned him against me with your lies and your obsession with a woman who chose someone else 40 years ago. The only poison here, Marcus said calmly, is the one you've been feeding your husband since the day you met him, making him believe his mother was a burden, that his loyalty to his family was weakness, that the only way to be a real man was to choose you over everyone else who'd ever loved him. She's a bitter old woman who can't accept that her son has moved on, Jovie snarled, pointing at me. She's jealous of what Michael and I have together. Had, Michael corrected coldly. What we had. Past tense. Jovie whirled back to face him. You think you can just walk away? You think it's that simple? I know things about you, Michael. Things that could ruin your career? Your reputation? Like what? Marcus interrupted smoothly. Like the fact that he's been struggling to make mortgage payments? Like the fact that his wife has been lying to him about everything from her family background to her previous marriages? Or maybe you're talking about the anonymous complaints that have been filed with his employer about his unstable home situation. Jovie's face went white. How did you know about the complaints you filed yourself? The ones designed to put pressure on Michael to choose between his job and his mother? Marcus smiled coldly. I told you, Mrs. Holloway. I make it my business to know about people who hurt the woman I love. You've been filing complaints about me at work? Michael asked, his voice barely controlled. I was trying to help, Jovie said weakly. If they thought your home life was affecting your performance, they'd understand why you needed space from your mother. You were sabotaging my career to manipulate me into abandoning my mother, Michael said, and I could hear the final pieces clicking into place for him. Jovie seemed to realize she'd lost everything. Her carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling, and there was nothing left but the truth she'd been hiding. Her face twisted with fury as she turned on me. This is all your fault, she hissed. If you'd just gone quietly, if you'd just accepted that you weren't wanted anymore, none of this would have happened. You're right, I said quietly, speaking for the first time since entering the room. If I'd just accepted being unwanted, you could have continued destroying my son's life without interference. I was giving him a better life, she insisted. You were isolating him from everyone who truly loved him so you could control him completely, I replied. Just like you did with your previous husbands. Jovie's last desperate gambit was to appeal to Michael's guilt one more time. Michael, please. I love you. Everything I did because I love you, and I wanted us to have a future together. Don't throw away 3 years of marriage over one misunderstanding. Michael looked at her for a long moment, and I saw something in his expression that reminded me of his father, a quiet strength I'd worried he'd lost forever. 3 years of lies isn't a misunderstanding, Jovie. It's fraud, and I'm done being your victim. Fine, Jovie said, her voice turning venomous again. Fine, but don't think this is over. I'll take you for everything you have. The house, your savings, your retirement. Actually, Marcus interjected, you won't, because the house belongs to me now, remember? And under the terms of your prenuptial agreement— We don't have a prenuptial agreement, Jovie interrupted. No, but your previous 2 husbands did. Very specific agreements that were mysteriously amended right before the divorces. Amazing how those amendments always seem to favor you, despite having no legal grounds. Almost like someone with law enforcement connections was helping to intimidate the husbands into signing. Jovie's face had gone ashen. You can't prove any of that. I don't have to, Marcus said simply. Your previous husbands are very interested in talking to investigators about how those agreements were changed. Seems they've been comparing notes. The fight went out of Jovie all at once. She stood there for a moment, looking between Michael and me and Marcus, and I could see her calculating whether there was any way to salvage the situation. There wasn't. This isn't over, she said finally, grabbing her purse. You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've started. On the contrary, Marcus replied. I think we've finished something that should have ended the day you first decided to hurt an innocent woman for your own gain. Jovie stormed out, her heels clicking angrily across the hardwood floor. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the windows. In the silence that followed, Michael sank back into his chair and put his head in his hands. Mom, he said without looking up. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I wanted to go to him, to comfort him, but 48 hours of betrayal and abandonment had left me cautious. Michael, no, let me say this. He finally looked up, and his eyes were red with unshed tears. I chose her over you, my own mother who raised me, who loved me unconditionally, who never asked for anything but respect, and I threw you out of your own home for a woman who was using me. You didn't know, I said softly. I should have known. I should have seen what she was doing, should have questioned why she was so determined to get rid of you. He wiped his eyes. God, Mom, can you ever forgive me? Looking at my son, really looking at him for the first time in months, I saw past the manipulation and hurt to the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The man who'd stood at his father's funeral and promised to take care of me. There's nothing to forgive, I said. You're my son. I'll always love you. But even as I said the words, I knew that our relationship would never be quite the same. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild, and I had my own future to consider now. A future that, for the first time in decades, was entirely my own to choose. 3 months later, I stood on the wraparound porch of my new home, watching the sunrise paint the lake in shades of gold and rose. The coffee in my hands was still steaming, and for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to get somewhere or worried about someone else's schedule. The house Marcus had built was everything he'd promised and more. 20 acres of rolling hills, a garden where I could grow all the roses I wanted, and a peace so profound it still sometimes took my breath away. But the most beautiful part wasn't the house itself. It was the man who'd kept a 43-year-old promise to build it for me. You're up early, Marcus said, stepping onto the porch with his own cup of coffee. Even at 64, he moved with the quiet confidence that had first attracted me when we were teenagers. Old habits, I replied, leaning into his side as he wrapped his arm around me. Besides, I love watching the sunrise from here. No regrets? He asked, and I knew he wasn't talking about waking up early. None, I said firmly. You? Only that it took us 43 years to get here. We'd married 6 weeks ago in a small ceremony by the lake, with only a handful of friends in attendance. Michael had been there, standing as Marcus's best man with tears in his eyes as he watched his mother marry the man who'd loved her since they were kids. The divorce from Jovie had been finalized just days before our wedding. True to form, she'd tried to take Michael for everything, but Marcus's investigation into her background had provided enough ammunition to ensure she left with nothing more than she'd brought to the marriage. Last I'd heard, she'd moved to another state, probably searching for her next victim. Michael had moved into a small apartment downtown and was slowly rebuilding his life. Our relationship was healing, but it would take time. Some wounds run deep, and the trust between us had been shattered by his choices during those final months with Jovie. But he was my son, and I could see he was genuinely trying to make amends. "Penny for your thoughts," Marcus said, following my gaze toward the lake. "Just thinking about choices," I said. "How one decision can change everything. Having second thoughts about marrying an old fool who's been carrying a torch for decades." I turned to look at him, this man who'd built an empire while never forgetting the girl who'd broken his heart. "The only fool here is the one who waited 43 years to come find you." "I couldn't come find you while you were married to Robert," he said gently, "no matter how much I wanted to." That was one of the things I loved most about Marcus, his fundamental decency. He'd loved me from afar for 4 decades, but he'd never once tried to interfere in my marriage or cause problems in my family. Even when he moved back to town, he'd simply watched from a distance, making sure I was safe. "What are your plans for today?" he asked, changing the subject. "I thought I'd work in the garden this morning. The roses you planted are finally starting to bloom." I smiled. "And this afternoon, I have something I want to show you." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Oh? A surprise. Something I've been working on while you've been traveling for business." Over the past month, Marcus had been wrapping up his construction projects, preparing to step back from day-to-day operations and focus on real estate investment. At our age, he said, it was time to enjoy the fruits of his labor rather than working 16-hour days. "Should I be worried?" he asked with mock concern. "Only if you don't like surprises." After breakfast, I spent the morning in my garden, marveling at the luxury of having nothing more pressing to do than tend my roses. The garden was Marcus's wedding gift to me. 2 acres of carefully planned beds filled with every variety of rose I'd ever dreamed of growing. But my real surprise was in the greenhouse he'd built for me, where I'd been working on a project that I hoped would honor both our past and our future. That afternoon, I led Marcus down the flagstone path to the greenhouse, my heart beating faster with anticipation. "Close your eyes," I said when we reached the door. "Faye, trust me." He closed his eyes and let me guide him inside. The greenhouse was filled with afternoon light, and the air was sweet with the scent of growing things. "Okay," I said. "You can look now." Marcus opened his eyes and gasped. I'd converted half the greenhouse into a workshop, complete with easels, paints, and canvases. But it wasn't the art supplies that made him catch his breath. It was the painting on the central easel. I'd painted Miller's Creek as it had been when we were teenagers, with the old cotton mill in the background and 2 young people sitting on the bank, planning their future together. But I'd also painted it as it was now. The mill converted into expensive condos, the creek cleaned up and landscaped, the 2 teenagers now silver-haired and hand in hand. "Faye," he whispered, "it's beautiful." "I started painting again after I moved in here," I said. "I haven't held a brush since high school, but somehow, being here, being happy again, it all came flooding back." Marcus studied the painting, his eyes moving from the young couple to the older one. "We look like we belong together. We do belong together. We always did." He turned to me, his eyes bright with emotion. "You know what this means?" "What?" "It means I finally get to give you everything I promised when we were kids. The house, the garden, and now, time. Time to rediscover all the dreams you put aside for other people." I felt tears prick my eyes. For 40 years, I'd been someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's caregiver. I'd defined myself by my relationships to other people, by what they needed from me. But here, in this place Marcus had built for me, I was finally free to be just myself. "There's something else," I said, leading him to another easel covered by a cloth. I painted this one for Michael. I pulled away the cloth to reveal a portrait of the three of us. Michael as a little boy, standing between Marcus and me. It was imaginary, of course, a vision of what might have been if my parents hadn't interfered all those years ago. "Do you think he'll like it?" I asked. "I think he'll treasure it," Marcus said, "just like I treasure you." That evening, we sat on the porch swing Marcus had built, watching the sunset reflect off the lake. It was the kind of peaceful moment I'd dreamed of, but never quite believed I'd experience. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd found each other sooner?" I asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, sometimes. "But then I think about all the lessons we had to learn separately before we could appreciate what we have together." "What kind of lessons?" "I had to learn that success without love is empty. You had to learn that love without respect is toxic. And we both had to learn that it's never too late to choose happiness." My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Michael. "Thank you for inviting me to dinner Sunday. I can't wait to see the new painting you mentioned. Love you, Mom." I showed the message to Marcus, who smiled. "He's coming around. He's trying," I said. "That's all I can ask for." "What about us? What are we trying for?" I leaned back against his shoulder, feeling more content than I had in decades. "We're not trying for anything. We're just being together, being happy, being ourselves, being 60-something and acting like teenagers," Marcus added with a chuckle. "Nothing wrong with that." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The pain of our original separation, the years of longing and regret, the betrayal and humiliation that had finally forced me to choose myself over the expectations of others. But mostly, I thought about the miracle of second chances. How love, real love, can survive anything. Time, distance, betrayal, loss. How it's possible to build a new life at any age, if you're brave enough to reach for it. "Marcus," I said softly. "Yes? Thank you for not giving up on us." He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "Thank you for being worth the wait." In the distance, a loon called across the lake, its voice carrying notes of wildness and freedom. I closed my eyes and listened, understanding for the first time in my life what it felt like to be truly home. Not in a house, not in a place, but in the arms of someone who saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. Someone who'd waited 43 years to keep a promise to a teenage girl who'd believed in his dreams. At 62, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. It's never too late to choose love. And when you do, when you finally have the courage to reach for the happiness you deserve, the universe has a way of giving you everything you've ever dreamed of, and more. The house with the wraparound porch was beautiful. The garden was everything I'd imagined. But the real gift was waking up every morning next to a man who'd never stopped believing in our story. Some love stories end in tragedy. Others end in compromise. Ours ended in triumph. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.